to go over MLA for Dummies, and specifically we're going to talk about what part of MLA tends to frustrate most students and most professors. After you've watched this video, you will understand why MLA is important. You'll know where to go to find updated MLA help. You'll know where to find bibliographic information and how to properly cite it within a text. We'll go over formatting an actual paper from the beginning, how to cite online sources, and how to cite in-text citations. So most students don't understand why the format matters. They've written the paper, isn't that good enough? Well, there's a few things to think about when you're actually writing a paper. You want whatever you turn into your teacher to make it easy for that teacher to grade, and MLA provides a standard format that is easy on the eyes. It's also a way to earn gimme points. Never once in my undergrad studies did I have a paper where I was not graded on the formatting. Sometimes that formatting is worth more points than others, but if I got it right, then I got those points as gimme points. MLA is a requirement for all humanities classes, and if you learn it now, then every paper you write throughout college will be easier, even if in the future you have to use a different formatting style. So why is MLA so difficult? It really isn't. It's a guideline of where to set margins, place your name, and incorporate quotes, which is the proof, into your essay. It helps others find more information about your topic, and there are several apps for that. However, be wary of these apps because MLA went through an update in 2016, so a lot of the apps might still reflect the 7th edition rather than the 8th edition. So what is MLA? MLA stands for Modern Language Associations, and it's a style of formatting that's used in humanities disciplines. Humanities are pretty much anything English, government, history classes, art classes, humanities courses, of course. On the left, you'll see what the new cover of the MLA handbook looks like for the 8th edition. On the right, you see MLA manual and guide for scholarly publishing. That one's a little bit different. We won't go into that one here. The basics. Type on white 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Double space everything. Use 12-point Times New Roman font. Leave only one space after punctuation. Set all margins to 1 inch. Indent the first line of paragraphs 1/2 inch, which is usually 1 tab. The header with page numbers goes in the upper right-hand corner, and you need to make sure that's in Times New Roman too. One of the big updates with the 2016 version is that now URLs are included, but you start with a www, not the http://. Italics are used for titles, so you no longer underline. Periods and commas always go inside quotation marks, and colons and semicolons always go outside quotation marks. The period goes after the in-text citation because the citation actually belongs with the sentence where the proof is. We'll get into a little more detail about that in a minute. Many students don't know exactly when to use quotes. Quotes in papers should be used sparingly. You only need to use quotes for material coming from another source or when you're writing in dialogue. You never ever use quotes to highlight a term. If you're trying to draw attention to your term, the problem is that you need stronger vocabulary. When you have suspicious quotation marks, as in the image to your right, employees must wash hands. Well, what exactly does wash hands mean, and why is it quoted? It's weird. Formatting the first page. MLA does not use the title page, and you need to double space everything. In the upper left corner of the first page, you're going to list your name, instructor's name, the course, and the date. Center the paper's title using standard capitalization rules. If you're not sure what those are, feel free to ask your teacher or do a Google search for how to capitalize titles. The title of your own paper is never underlined, italicized, or quoted or bold. It is simply Times New Roman 12, just like the rest of your paper. Create a header in the upper right-hand corner, which is a 1/2 inch from the top edge of the right of the page, and include your last name and page number. But no punctuation goes into that. So let's look at an MLA template right now. Let's open up a Word document now. I have a Mac, so my screen might look a little different from yours, but generally speaking, it'll be the same general idea. When you look at a Word document, it is automatically against MLA formatting. So you have to go in and fix it yourself. So remember, we want to start with your name, and then the professor's name, the course. Sometimes you have to put the times. You might, especially if your instructor has several classes. And then the date. And the date can be done in the military way, which would be like 17 July 2016, or if you prefer, July 17th, 2016. The next line, you center and you type your original title. The title is never going to be something like Essay 1. It'll be something that actually has to do with the document that you're creating. All right, go back to Left Justified and tab once and start your paper. All right, so the problem here is this just typed in not Times New Roman, not double spaced. So what we're going to do is go ahead and highlight everything. Change up here the font to Times New Roman and 12. Okay, you go up here to Format, to Paragraph. You want to make sure that your spacing is double and that these before and after right here are zeros. In some versions of Word, these are preloaded, and what this means here is that every time you hit the Enter button, you will have extra space between your lines, and that's not okay. And then do OK. Now, some versions of Word have a way to start a paper in APA or in MLA, and you can do that. You just need to go back and double check it. So here we've got the beginning of our paper, and I need to go into the header. The easiest way to do that is to right-click up in the header. So you're going to put your last name, and for this paper, for Susie Student's paper, we're going to put her last name, which is Student. Then you go into Header and Footer, and it will tell you the page number. You put the page number. Now sometimes it'll tell you to put it to the right. Occasionally it will move student's name. So if it does that, just the easiest thing to do is go back over right before it and type the last name again. Now if you'll notice, this is not in Times New Roman, so you've got to go back over here and fix that. So Word kind of fights you on your formatting, so make sure that you're very careful with how you do this. We want to make sure that the paper is actually got the right margins. So if you go over to margins, and like here I have a choice, top 1 inch, bottom 1 inch, right and left are both 1 inch, so I'll hit normal. So this is correct. And that's how you set up your document. And once you have done this, you might as well just save it as a template so that you can go in for any paper that's in MLA format and start from there. So let's take a look at how Works Cited for books are done now, because this is a little different. The basic format is the last name of the author, comma, first name, the title of the book, which is in italics. It's italicized because it is a large publication. The publisher, that's the company, we no longer use the city or where it was done, comma, the year of publication. So for example, we have Glick, comma, James, Chaos Making a New Science, Penguin, comma, 1987. Notice it does not say print behind it anymore. Web sources can be a little bit tricky because they don't always have everything that you would need for a citation. So you try to give as much as possible. The way that online sources are cited is one of the major changes in the 2016 version. So you want to make sure you pay close attention to this. You start with the editor, author, or compiler's name, last name, comma, first name, if it's available. If it's not available, you want to make sure that you go through your list as to how to determine whether or not the source is credible. The next thing is the article name, then the name of the site. The name of the site is a large body of published information, so that's why it's italicized. So it's kind of like I have a book, meaning I have the internet site, and this piece of it that I'm using is the article name. We want to include the date of the last update, and then the URL, but you leave off the http://. You just start with the next thing, which might be www, or it might be an actual word. It depends on the site. And then the date of access. Now the date of access is now optional, so you're going to want to make sure to ask your professor if they still want it. The reason it's optional and the reason we now have the URLs is that URLs change. So if you have a citation with the URL on a Thursday, if I go to check that site the following Wednesday, that site may have moved or that page may have moved. So that's why a lot of people prefer to keep the date of access in there. So here's an example of a web source. Castillo, comma, Michelle, so that's the writer. Quote, New York Senator, HTTP, a welcome map for would-be hackers. And that's the title of an article. Time.com is italicized, so you know that's the main website where that article is found. 28 February 2011 is the date it was published. And then here you'll see we have the URL. Notice though, there's no HTTP and it's not a live link. So you're going to want to make sure that your teachers tell you whether or not they want the live link. But you notice it does not have the HTTP part. Here's another example. Now this one doesn't have quite as much information. Smokeless tobacco is addictive. This is in quotes, so we know it's an article title. It's not a major body, but it did come from Truth, which is the online website. It does not have a date. Here is the URL, but it includes the www, but not the HTTP. Access 23 March 2015. Okay. Sometimes with online sources, you can find good information that you just can't find all of the publication information about. You just got to give it as much as you possibly can. So let's talk about in-text citations. The first word in the bibliographic information on the Works Cited page is the signal word. Usually it's the author's name or abbreviated title if there's no author. So for example, if we went back to this article, we might put in our parenthetical citation within the body of the text, smokeless, because we wouldn't necessarily want to write smokeless tobacco is addictive. In that case, smokeless tobacco is addictive would be quoted, but if you just use smokeless, it would not. Notice also there is no comma between the author and the page number. However, if you refer to the author in the sentence, you would only include the page number in the parentheses. So Townsend defends her position as a Tea Party candidate with a deep admiration of American idealism. Notice there's no end punctuation, meaning period, inside the quotation mark, because that's not the end of the sentence. The end of the sentence is after you have the citation, so it goes here. There's only the one, and it goes right there. If you wish to cite an entire work, a web publication that has no pagination or other type of reference marker, it's often preferable to include in the text the name of the person, for example, the author, editor, compiler, that begins the corresponding entry in the Works Cited list. So in that case, you want to identify the writer within the sentence. Joe Blow states that, quote, if you cannot work the writer into the sentence, simply include his or her name after the quote. If there is a breakup in the text of specific paragraphs that you can actually count, you would cite it Townsend pars, period. Pars stands for paragraphs 2-3. So you want to give people as much information as possible. Online sources, as I mentioned, are often incomplete. So that's one of the reasons you have to be very careful and make sure that you're quoting a credible source. So let's see if this student mastered MLA. So here's an example of a student essay, and we're going to go through it kind of quickly. But when you first look at this, you can tell that there are some things just flat out missing. For example, there is no header. So we have to go back into the header. Remember, we can do it this way, including the page number on the right. And if you type student right in front of it, add a space. Okay. Now we still need to make sure that that's in Times New Roman, because sometimes Word likes to fight us on that. And it is. We can close out the header because it's good. Now let's look at just how this paper looks right here. There's a lot of space between Susie Student, Libby Bennett, and so on. And there's a lot extra space here. If you look here, there's even extra space here. You can see that the space here is more than the space between here, but it should be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do to fix this, I'm just going to highlight the entire document, and depending on what type of computer you have, you can either go into a paragraph from the right-click menu or whatever. So you see here where it says before and after, there's nothing here. It needs to have a 0 in both places, and line spacing needs to have double. Once we do that, the entire document has been changed, and we can look and see how everything is closer. This person put an extra space after the title of her paper, which is Eating Disorders. Eating Disorders is properly formatted. It's not quoted or italicized. It is a little boring, so perhaps she could have been more creative in this endeavor. So now what I want to do, and this is going to be a little tricky, so I'm going to guide you through it. I'm going to make it a little bit larger, and I want you to help me go through this and look at the actual citations themselves. Okay. The first one I find is this one right here. It's called Encyclopedia, Pica, which is in quotes. So what this tells us is encyclopedia is someone's last name, and they have an article entitled Pica. Now, it's very unlikely that someone has the last name of encyclopedias, but let's just go down and look at the Works Cited page to see if it matches. Okay. I don't see the word encyclopedia as a signal word. Remember that first word in the citation should be the signal word. But I do see pica, and it is coming from Encyclopedia Issues and Controversies. Okay, so the article is called pica. It's coming from this book, but it's not properly cited. There should be an author here, but encyclopedias often do not have credited authors. And I'm looking here and I see a URL that is not properly formatted, but we'll get to that in a second. And so I can tell it's an online, so there's probably not page numbers. So if you go back up here and fix that error in the paper, you would just take out encyclopedia and the comma, make sure the spacing is right, and it would be pica because that's where it's coming from. Now the same error was made here on this citation. So you would fix it the same way. Okay, take out pica, or take out encyclopedia and just leave pica. If you go down a little bit further, we come to another citation. Now this is Brody, eating disorders. Well, first of all, we don't use commas in in-text citation. But let's see if we can find a source written by Brody. We go back to the Works Cited page. I don't see anything written by Brody. So this tells me that either the student is not carefully making sure to use credible sources, or perhaps has copied and pasted information from places that they shouldn't be, which would indicate something dishonest. I do see two entries that look like eating disorders. One is eating disorders. The other one is eating disorders, signs and symptoms, sidebar. A sidebar is like when you have a little takeaway on the side of a page that gives more information. In a textbook, that's often where they put like vocabulary words. So I think that this is probably the source, but because this one is so close and could actually be shortened, I really don't know. So I would have to mark the student off on this because they did not list the Brody citation. Also, if you look over here, you see issues and controversies on file, which is kind of close to this thing up here, which would make me wonder which one was correct, or they could be two different things. But these are the things that your teachers are looking for when you're actually going through a paper. So at this point, I can't say whether Brody is right or wrong. I just have to sit there and highlight it and say, I don't know. If we go down here, we see another one called Eating Disorders and Symptoms. Now, if we go back to the Works Cited page, there was a citation that said Eating Disorder Signs and Symptoms sidebar. So that could be a shortened version. And if it is a shortened version of this citation, then it is correct and the student actually did it right there. Now, if we go down to this one, we have the word obesity. Now, the signal word should be the author's last name, the article name in quotations. So this tells me that someone with the last name Obesity wrote this article. That is very unlikely. I've never met a Mr. or Mrs. Obesity. But I'm going to look down here and I'm going to look for the signal word. Oh, there is an obesity as a signal word, but it needs to have the quotes. So if I go back up there to obesity and I add the quotes, then it is actually correct. The same would go for this time when the student wrote about the obesity article. So far, that looks pretty much like everything. But let's look at the Works Cited page. Well, first of all, we don't have an actual title, and it needs to have a title. It's called Works Cited, not Works Cited or Work Cited. If you have more than one thing that you're citing, it's plural, works. Cited is with a C, not an S. These citations need to be alphabetized by signal word, okay? So they're not in alphabetical order because you know that E comes before P. Now, if we look at this, this isn't correct. They have the full URL, which is not acceptable anymore. So you need to make sure that you delete the HTTP part and these little bracket things, okay? And that goes for every single one of these citations. Once we have done this, it looks like they're in better shape. But let's look at these dates. Facts on File Services, 9 May 2003, Web, 28 November 2010. We no longer need web because web indicates the internet, but that's what this does. The URL tells us it's the internet. So we're going to take that part off, and then we would delete this, or perhaps we'll just save it for later. Okay, take it out of there. If your teacher wants the date of access, then you would add here, accessed, and the date. That would be how you would correct that citation for MLA 2016. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in class.